I'm Teresa Coraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. My topic today is what I hope is a loving response to Peter and Ginger Breggin from their recent post, Anti-Semitism Gets Personal. They expressed that they had been dismayed and disillusioned by two people who they admired and respected, and one of whom they had grown quite fond and thought that might be a new friendship. And then this person had expressed anti-Semitic opinions about Israel and Hamas and had even posted the Protocols of Zion and a picture of that. So I feel like this person may well be me, mostly because the feelings are so mutual. I love the Breggins. I am sorry for their ordeal with the Malone lawsuit, but I'm so happy that it gave me the opportunity to get to know them and to be a part of their life. I really admire them, and in particular for the stance that they took on the Matthias Desmet and the mass psychosis. What they did was stand up for people, where Malone and Desmet were taking a position of superiority, and that was very appealing to other people who wanted to see themselves as smarter and more independent and superior for seeing through the psyops. What the Breggins did was look at it as more situational than a character flaw and say these people were subjected to extreme trauma, and that's what made them buy into that. And I really appreciated that because that's how I feel too. The crux of the debate. I don't need to agree with my friends on everything, or else I would have no friends. And I also don't need to make a public statement every time I disagree, even though it may seem that way. In this case, I felt like the common ground of goodwill that we had may have been a fertile place to have that conversation, because I don't like the fact that I'm disturbing their sleep and that this is something that's creating conflict for them. But I probably wouldn't have responded if it hadn't been for their censorship of Nephihotep. Now, I'm not against censorship. I have very strict rules on my stack. I do not allow insults, name-calling of people or of groups. I don't allow character attacks. And I've been known to ban or block people permanently if they violate those. But that would be extremely out of character for Nephihotep. And sure enough, when he sent me the comment that he'd posted, it was full of statistics and history and verifiable sources and nothing that seemed objectionable. First, I wanted to clarify the foundation of my beliefs, the position from which I'm arguing, a word that I use as a productive dialogue to move towards agreement. My position is all people are morally equal, equally beloved of God, if there is a God. They are equally valuable to the world. We are all inherently good, and when we behave badly, stories and systems are to blame. Stories and systems can be changed. These are my rules for productive dialogue, that ethics is consistency with your own dogma. An ethical statement can contain no proper nouns. Like the formula around an equal sign, all values that substitute for the variables need to still be true when reversed. Questions need to be defined along with the terms in them and why the question matters. So here are the questions that I think matter most from distilling the difference between my position and the Breggins. Does the morality of our ancestors determine who we are? Should it be a source of pride or shame? Is it a reflection on us? 2, do some ancestors matter more than others? 3, how do we know if we've been lied to? 4, how can the rights of Israel be expressed within the rules I stated above? In the lawsuit with Malone, He made the earlier statement that it was legitimate to ask whether he was controlled opposition, but it seems only if the Breggins came to the answer he wanted. In this case, I want to ask whether the questions on the back of their book, COVID-19 and the Global Predators, are legitimate to ask, whether or not we come to the same answers. Those questions are: who are they, these global predators? What are their motives and their plans for us? And how can we defend against them? Let's get started. Are our ancestors a reflection on us? This is, I've been thinking, perhaps the most dangerous misconception in all of history, because history would be a neutral topic. It would be something we'd be looking at and saying, okay, well, that system didn't work very well, but this seems like it worked over here. But instead, we take it personally. We look at it as a reflection based on our own ethnicity and who our ancestors were. Peter mentions that he feels that the Jews are the chosen people because they are held to a higher standard. Now, by whom? And what are the consequences of that? And how exactly do you measure that? Much of my writing has been to look at the morality of the Torah and what God enforces, sometimes genocide down to the suckling babe, or what he forbids, which is usually intermarriage. Mark Alexander reminded me of a really good source called Skeptic's Annotated Bible. It has a section called Drunk with Blood, God's Killings in the Bible. It counts 2.8 million countable victims of God. And this starts with Lot's wife, who ends up committing the crime of looking back when her home and neighbors and everything she knows is destroyed, rather than being righteous like her husband Lot and enabling his rape of their daughters. Now, they don't count the flood because even though that's hard to beat with God killing everyone, it was not countable. You may be saying, why is she talking about this when her purpose is to not offend Peter? Let's examine that. Of course, you know that I wouldn't think that Lot's behavior is a reflection on Peter, but you think that Peter does. That is the crux of this debate. When I write about the figures in the Bible not being real, not being ancestors, and not being good people, why would it offend anyone? Only if that person sees their own value and worth as being enhanced because of their bloodline connection to those people. You have to first swallow that poison pill of superiority before criticism of them becomes something that affects you. I've noticed that #ChosenOnes is trending with videos like, why are the chosen ones alone with no friends and no relationship? The answer is that when you are so bright that other people with darkness inside them just can't stand it, they run away from you. Let's hope that the rapture siphons this guy up soon with his fucking arrogance. Do some ancestors matter more than others? Let's say that ancestors do matter, and that if your ancestors are said to have done terrible things, that is a reflection on you. And if your ancestors were enslaved or murdered, that's something that should never be covered up. That's something we need to get out and talk about. Are the Breggins with me so far? Now let's look at Neferhotep's comment that he had posted. He wrote, "The Morgenthau Plan for Germany became part of the Potsdam Agreement, a solemn declaration of policy and undertaking for action, signed by the United States of America, Great Britain, and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Besides dividing Germany into a west and east part, in July and August 1945, the occupying armies took 25% of Germany's most fertile land and placed it under Russian and Polish control, forcibly expelling about 16 million people, according to the British writer Victor Gollancz, with the very maximum of brutality. The Allies forbade emigration and kept millions of prisoners in forced labor camps. Some 4.16 million Germans were forced to slave labor outside Germany. 3 million in Russia, 750,000 in France, 400,000 in Britain, and 10,000 in Belgium. General Dwight D. Eisenhower labeled them disarmed enemy forces to violate the Geneva Convention. Some 1.4 million died in the Allied concentration camps, of which, according to the Soviets, 450,000 in their camps. Neff goes on to present census data showing that there were 5.7 million excess German deaths in the years immediately after World War II. He wonders whether the 6 million number for deaths of Jews could have come from that. But that, of course, is also refuted by the census data, because in 1933, the International Zionists posted their article, Judea Declares War on Germany, and they stated there were only 600,000 Jews living in Germany. So that 6 million number is inflated by 1,000% for those killed rather than those living in Germany. My maiden name is Zembauer, and my mother was a Martz, so German on both sides with a grandmother who spoke German. If my dad had been born in Germany in his year of 1922, I have a 94% chance of never having been born, because only 6% of men born that year survived. All my life, I've been told that my ancestors are sadistic killers or sheep who would look the other way while their neighbors are being dragged off. Like Peter, I grew up watching trailers of German atrocities. And like Ginger, I remember reading in high school Night and the Diary of Anne Frank. I remember being shown Night and Fog, the movie, and going in the bathroom and fainting and hitting my head on the radiator. I was a sensitive soul, and it tormented me that people could be so cruel and that the blood of those killers ran in my veins. Now, after 67 years of living with that ethnic guilt, Neferhotep presents them with evidence that my ancestors were victims, and they delete it. 16 million of my people harshly expelled from their lands, and they don't want to hear about it. 4 million of my people forced into slavery, and that's not worth their time. It ends up almost 6 million of my people who were killed after the war, some of them in concentration camps, and that's deleted as a nuisance. Is my outrage over this not justified? Why is it that some people's ancestors matter, and for others, if you present evidence that they were not bloodthirsty predators, but actually victims, you can be put in jail in many countries? This is something that I think we need to be talking about. Meanwhile, I'm not supposed to talk about the current genocide being perpetrated by Israel, because that might trigger bad feelings against the perpetrators. Even Caitlin Johnstone, who once threatened to ban me for talking about the Jews, now is posting about sniper drones that are broadcasting crying babies to lure out women so that they can shoot them. And Peter may want to also check out her article on the rubble and the bodies that are buried under the hospitals in Gaza that he says Hamas was hiding under. How do we know if we've been lied to? The other unnamed person who dismayed and disillusioned the Breggins was a friend who thought that the U.S. should defend Iran against Israel. Peter said, Iran wants to take over the world, but Israel is just defending itself. Ginger remembered the Iran hostage crisis as something that showed the kind of people that they are. And Peter said yes, and that ended the day that Reagan took office because they were afraid of a strong Republican, unlike Jimmy Carter. So I consulted an AI synopsis of the Iran hostage crisis and Reagan. It reads, "The Iran hostage crisis was a significant event during Ronald Reagan's presidential campaign. Political analysts have suggested that the crisis contributed to the decline of President Jimmy Carter's popularity and his eventual loss in the 1980 presidential election. Some allegations have surfaced, claiming that the Reagan campaign made secret deals with Iranian leaders to delay the release of the hostages until after the election. These allegations, known as the October Surprise, suggest that the Reagan campaign aimed to prevent Carter from pulling off an October surprise by resolving the hostage crisis before the election. The hostages were formally released into U.S. custody on January 20th, 1981, just minutes after Ronald Reagan was sworn into office. However, these have not been conclusively proven and remain a topic of debate. In 1985, the Reagan administration became involved in another controversy related to Iran known as the Iran-Contra affair. This involved secret arms sales to Iran, which was under an arms embargo, in exchange for the release of American hostages held by Hezbollah in Lebanon. The administration initially declined these secret talks, but later admitted to the arms for hostages deals. AI conveniently leaves out that this was in exchange for the Contra part, the arms sales that funded a campaign of terrorism against Nicaragua in order to induce regime change and install a puppet government. Curiously, the president of Iran during the hostage crisis left right after Reagan was sworn in, and his new arms smuggling president of Iran started later that year and stayed exactly through both terms. Timing like that is always a clue. I remember Operation Cast Lead, which was a 3-week massacre of Palestinians after Christmas 2008 that ended the day that Obama took office. Things like that are clues. They are not coincidences. Israel as a variable. Can the rules for ethical discourse be used to present a solution for Israel and Palestine? So let's review those, that an ethical statement can contain no proper nouns and that you have to be able to flip them on the equal sign and have that still be true. So Peter's statement were that the Jews love their nation, Israel, and that the Arab states are plenty big enough to take in all of the Palestinian refugees. Substituting other values for that proper noun, this would read, Palestinians love their nation, Palestine. The U.S. is plenty big enough to take in all the Israeli Jews. Most of them already have dual citizenship. Now let's try formulating it with no proper nouns. All people deserve to live in their place of ethnic origin and expel all people who've lived there in the interim. This certainly doesn't bode well for colonizing peoples like in the U.S. But according to Hebrew scriptures, all people ended up wherever Noah's Ark landed. That seems pretty crowded. But the land of Canaan goes back to one of the original 4 who are named from Noah. So the land of Canaan belongs to the Canaanites if we're looking at who's been there the longest. And the Canaanites are the Palestinians. Palestinians love their nation. Who are the global predators? First, is this a legitimate question to ask no matter where it leads? I think the Breggins would agree it is. The fate of our world depends on it. In a 1992 book that Peter wrote called Beyond Conflict, he developed 11 traits of the perpetrator syndrome. They include denying or minimizing the damage they do, rationalization, blaming the victim, no empathy, anger and blame, dehumanizing, use of authority, power, and domination, and grandiose and self-centered and alienated. So if we apply this to the global predator profile, one of the characteristics that they have in common, according to Peter and Ginger, is opposition to Donald Trump. The Breggins then list 11 companies hostile to Trump, and then anti-Trumpers ranked among the largest corporations. From these, they derive a list of 14 American billionaire predators. My perspective is that this has been going on for millennia, and that it is much bigger than this election cycle. So that's the perspective that I'm looking at when I'm looking at who are the global predators. What are their motives and their plans? The Breggins were particularly disturbed that I had posted a picture of the protocols of the Elders of Zion, and they said that that was the leading instigator next to Mein Kampf of violence against the Jews. When I consulted Dean Henderson and his article on the protocols, he said that they're not even Jewish. He writes, "The document known as the Protocols of the Wise Men of Zion was obtained by the daughter of a Russian general after she paid a bribe of 2,500 French francs to a member of the Mizraim Freemason Lodge in Paris, which is home to the inner circle of the Knights Templar known as the Priory of Sion. The Priory of Sion elites believe that Jesus faked his death with the help of certain herbs, then married the administrator of those herbs, Mary Magdalene. The Priory believes the couple fled to southern France and had numerous children. During the 5th century, the theory goes, Jesus' descendants married into the Frank royalty from which France takes its name, thus creating the Merovingian dynasty. This royal blood, or sangreal, is the justification the crown uses to legitimize its rule over humanity. The protocol's authors were not Jewish. First, they were Satanist, intent on creating a political movement called Zionism, which seeks to use Israel as its linchpin for City of London global hegemony and as guardian of the vast Rothschild-Rockefeller oil reserves of the Middle East region. Its power center has moved from Sumeria to Egypt to Rome and is now in the City of London, 1 square mile separate jurisdiction within but not governed by London or the United Kingdom. Neferhotep also has an article that clarifies this called the No Annexation Principle and why it matters. He writes, "With respect to the protocols of Zion, the underlying pretextual party of power being mentioned in the protocols are the Jews. This in and of itself is flat wrong. Those who wrote it and planned it are definitely not Jewish. They are in fact Sabbatean Frankists. They are also the administrators of the sovereign trust as trustees. The individuals who actually wrote this protocol wanted to cause people to get pissed off at the Jewish community. By being truthful and upfront about the nature of the planned content, but making it look like Jews were doing it." He quotes from the second protocol, "It is indispensable for our purposes that as far as possible, wars should bring no territorial advantages. This will shift war to an economic footing, and nations will perceive the strength of our superiority in the aid we render." The article then goes on to show all of the things that were plans at that time and are now accomplished. How do we defend against them? James Corbett, in an interview he did with Mercola, said, "You introduce this topic with the concept of propaganda and potential uses of large language models for propagandistic purposes. We should go back to the man who wrote the book on propaganda called Propaganda, Edward Bernays, who said, The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate the unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. That was Edward Bernays in 1928. His words are as true today as they were then, perhaps even more so. And the true ruling power of the country, of the world at this point perhaps, are those who can most effectively, consciously, and intelligently manipulate the organized habits and opinions of the masses. What do the global predators want? Peter says that all questions can be answered if you look at what do the global predators want. We both agree that it is not as simple as money, that money is a means to an end. He's just finishing a book on banking, and he says that the Rothschilds just don't show up very much in it. He feels that that's another anti-Semitic attack, that Christians and Muslims just weren't very interested in money and collecting interest, and so the Jews stepped into that void. I've come to agree that the Rothschilds may be high-paid servants who are, true to their name, a Roth red shield hiding someone else. I also think that they are hiding behind the Jews and may not even be Jewish. Their true name is Bauer, which is the same as my maiden name, Zem Bauer, and it means of the farm. So theirs is a German word for farm, not a Jewish name at all. Maybe they took on the identity of being a Jew in order to have the privilege of usury. And privilege means a private law for the liege, for the king. All three presidential candidates are deferential to Israel, but Trump is really their golden boy, or orange moonchild, as Isaac Middle calls him. He's done an astrological chart showing that Trump fulfills all the prophecies, a little too well. And Miles Mathis has done a genealogical chart showing that Trump is probably Jewish, if he exists at all, which is a question for him and for me, or whether he is just an actor. The value of religion for the globalist is that you don't have to conquer in order to control. You can infiltrate and then strike from within. People of good heart and moral character, like Peter Breggin, can be your apologist and set you up as a victim and let the tender-hearted take you in. Diva Drops has asked, why is Trump reciting the snake song, the one that says, "Take me in, tender woman, take me in for heaven's sake," and he's half frozen, and after he thaws out and bites her, he sneers. Why, you knew I was a snake before you took me in. Is this the infiltration that he's warning us about? Someone wrote that the Khazarian method is to stand in front of you and say, "I'm going to kill you, okay?" And then you have consented. The symbol of the Merovingian dynasty is the serpent or the snake. What Peter says the globalists want is to destroy nations and our loyalty to them so that then they can have one world government. Isn't that what Israel does? Infiltrate with people to whom their loyalty belongs to Israel and not to the nation that's merely a tender-hearted host. If we take back the power of usury, the power locally to create those mortgages and the credit that repays them, we defang the snake. They no longer own our property, our lives, our land, our labor. It doesn't matter who's behind the Rothschilds or who's in front. We reclaim our power. I'll end with the Semitism psychosis. The word Semite, which is Shemite, means a son and descendant of Shem, the brother who was given the right to rule over everyone else, with the others cursed to be his slaves. This is a sociopathic ideology. No one is born to rule, and no one is cursed to be a slave. So to be anti-Semitism is to be against the concept of rulers and slaves, and to have a loving affirmation that all people are born equal. I love the Breggins. I don't think that my involvement in their life through the curious incident of Malone was an accident. I think I've been put in their path for a reason. They know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I have no hate in my heart for anyone, including the global predators. I think that childhood trauma has been intentionally inflicted to keep them silent, loyal, and obedient, and I don't wish that on anyone. Having someone trustworthy present information that conflicts with everything you've been taught is disturbing. No one knows that better than them. What I'm saying to them is what they've said to others for 4 years. Don't reject my conclusions. Do your homework. Examine the facts for yourself. Go through analyzing Hebrew scriptures. Look at World War II from the German perspective with films like Hellstorm. Look at my logic and tell me why I'm wrong. Or agree that I'm right and that Shemitism is neither safe nor effective. Or they could do what I suspect many have done in looking at the Breggins, saying, I don't have the time or the energy to examine all the nuances of the science the way they have, but I know that they're good people who want the best, and so I'm going to feel at peace with this and let them figure out this part of the puzzle. I am sad that my words have dismayed the Breggins, but I'm not sorry that they feel disillusioned. Illusions are not serving any of us, no matter how comforting. And for more, because I think I need it, here is Self-Care in an Apocalypse, and this is Forgiveness is the Shortcut. Thank you for watching.